This is not a trade dispute on paper. This is a shockwave moving straight through the heart of rural America. A single number has just been thrown onto the table: 200%. Not 10, not 20, 200. A tariff so extreme it would instantly rewrite the price of farm equipment across the United States. Tractors, loaders, compact machines, the tools farmers depend on to survive tight margins and unpredictable seasons, would become dramatically more expensive overnight. And here is the part most headlines are avoiding. If this happens, the first people to feel the pain will not be executives or politicians. It will be farmers. Farmers already under pressure from high interest rates, volatile commodity prices, and shrinking credit access. Farmers who are delaying purchases, renting equipment, or turning to the used market just to stay afloat. A 200% tariff would not punish a corporation. It would detonate directly inside their cost structure. This is why the situation is so dangerous. Because it looks like patriotism on the surface, but economically, it behaves like self-sabotage. The trigger for this threat was John Deere's announcement that part of its manufacturing would expand into Mexico. Almost immediately, the move was framed as betrayal, as abandonment, as a symbolic attack on American manufacturing. But symbolism does not pay invoices. Symbolism does not move crops. And symbolism does not keep farms solvent. What is unfolding here is not a moral drama. It is a collision between political theater and economic gravity. And gravity always wins. But to understand why this threat exists and why Deere made this move in the first place, you have to strip away the emotion and look at the decision no one wanted to hear. Because the real story does not begin with Mexico. It begins with costs, labor, and survival. And once you see that, the narrative collapses. John Deere's expansion into Mexico is being described as a sudden betrayal. It is not. It is the result of pressures that have been building for years, pressures that American manufacturing has struggled to confront honestly. Start with labor. U.S. Manufacturing labor costs are among the highest in the world. At the same time, skilled worker shortages are worsening, not improving. Plants are competing for fewer workers at higher wages while productivity growth slows. Now add supply chains. Post-pandemic congestion never fully disappeared. Shipping delays, component bottlenecks, and inventory volatility have become structural problems, not temporary disruptions. Mexico offers a different equation: lower labor costs, a growing skilled workforce, and critically, geographic proximity, not just to the United States, but to high-growth agricultural markets across Latin America. Brazil, Argentina, Colombia. These are not marginal markets. They are expanding fast, modernizing agriculture, and demanding exactly the kind of mid-frame equipment Deere plans to build. This is not about abandoning Iowa or Illinois. Deere has been explicit. Less than 5% of its North American operations are shifting. Core harvesters and large equipment remain in the United States. But perception does not care about percentages. Perception cares about timing, and the timing could not be worse. Rural plants are already nervous. Communities that built their identity around manufacturing feel exposed. So when a company like Deere makes even a limited move abroad, it triggers something deeper than economics. It triggers fear of irrelevance. Here is the hard truth. Global manufacturing is no longer organized around loyalty. It is organized around efficiency, resilience, and access. Deere is not unique. AGCO, CNH Industrial. Other peers are adjusting footprints quietly, trying to stay lean in an environment where margins are thinner and volatility is permanent. Calling this betrayal may feel emotionally satisfying, but emotionally satisfying explanations rarely survive contact with balance sheets. And that is where the next fault line appears. Because while the political backlash grows louder, Deere's financials reveal something far more alarming, something that explains why this move happened now. The response was immediate and explosive. At rallies and in public statements, the message was blunt. If John Deere builds machines elsewhere, they will pay a 200% tariff to bring them back. This was not a policy nuance. It was a warning shot. And politically, it worked. It reframed the issue from economics to loyalty, from cost structures to national identity, from strategy to symbolism. But tariffs do not operate in a vacuum. A tariff of this magnitude would ripple through the entire agricultural ecosystem. Equipment prices would surge, dealers would struggle, repair costs would climb, financing would tighten further, and the consequences would not stop at the border. Mexico would respond. Other trade partners would take notes. Retaliation would not be theoretical, it would be inevitable. There is also a deeper contradiction at play. Tariffs are being presented as tools to protect American workers. Yet the very people they are supposed to protect, farmers and rural communities, would be the first casualties. This is the paradox at the center of the standoff. Can tariffs revive domestic industry in a world where production is global, automated, and capital-intensive? Or do they simply shift costs downward until they land on the weakest link? Congress is already signaling escalation. Proposals to restrict federal purchases of foreign-made equipment are circulating. Hearings are being discussed. Lobbying pressure is rising. But none of this changes one inconvenient fact. Even if John Deere never built a single machine in Mexico, jobs would still disappear. Because the real force reshaping manufacturing is not offshoring, it is automation. And that is the part almost no one wants to confront. Because once the conversation shifts there, the entire debate changes and the political comfort zone disappears. That is where this story becomes truly dangerous. John Deere did not make its Mexico decision from a position of comfort. The timing matters. In its most recent earnings report, Deere revealed a 35% drop in revenue, sharply missing Wall Street expectations. This was not a minor correction. It was a signal that the agricultural cycle had turned against manufacturers. Commodity prices are softer. Interest rates remain elevated. Credit conditions are tighter. For farmers, that combination is toxic. New equipment purchases are being postponed. Leasing and rentals are replacing ownership. The used equipment market is surging, a clear sign that buyers are conserving cash and delaying long-term commitments. Data from auction platforms and resellers shows listings for large tractors and machinery jumping dramatically. When used inventories explode, it is not optimism, it is caution. And yet, here is the paradox. Despite the revenue shock, Deere's stock recovered. Investors did not panic. In fact, many interpreted the downturn as cyclical, not existential. Why? Because Deere is not standing still. The company still projects up to $5.5 billion in net income in the coming year. Cost-cutting measures are accelerating. Automation inside factories is expanding. And perhaps most importantly, Deere's business is no longer anchored solely to the U.S. market. More than half of its agricultural and turf exports now go to Canada, Europe, Brazil, and Australia. That diversification gives Deere breathing room and leverage. The Mexico expansion is not a desperate gamble. It is a calculated hedge against a shrinking domestic window. And that calculation points directly to the next transformation, one that makes geography almost irrelevant. While tariffs dominate headlines, John Deere is reshaping agriculture in a far quieter way. Through automation, autonomous tractors capable of operating for hours without a driver, precision sprayers guided by artificial intelligence, drones that detect pests before the human eye can see them, cloud platforms that monitor soil conditions, fleet health, and yield forecasts in real time. These are not prototypes, they are commercial products. Deere's autonomous systems use GPS, sensors, and machine learning to navigate fields with near-perfect accuracy. In remote regions, connectivity solutions are being bundled to ensure continuous operation even where infrastructure is weak. From an efficiency standpoint, this is revolutionary. From a labor standpoint, it is destabilizing. Machines do not require overtime pay. They do not unionize. They do not retire. And critically, they do not care where they are assembled. Whether a machine is built in Iowa or Mexico has no bearing on its capacity to replace a human operator. That replacement is coming either way. Oxford Economics estimates that up to 20 million manufacturing jobs could disappear globally by 2030 due to automation. Agriculture will not be spared. This is the uncomfortable reality beneath the political noise. John Deere is not replacing American workers with Mexican workers. It is replacing workers with software. Tariffs cannot stop that. And once that realization sinks in, the debate shifts from trade policy to something far more difficult: social adaptation. John Deere has been more than a manufacturer. For generations, it has been a symbol. Its logo is etched into barns, equipment sheds, and family histories. That is why this moment feels so personal and so volatile. Across rural communities, the reaction is deeply split. Some see Deere's move as a betrayal of the towns and workers that built its legacy. Others view it as a necessary evolution in a global economy that no longer rewards nostalgia. The political response reflects this fracture. Proposals to restrict government purchases of foreign-made equipment are gaining traction. Congressional hearings are being discussed. Trade policy is being reshaped around domestic production thresholds. At the same time, Deere's lobbying efforts are intensifying. The argument is blunt. Tariffs will not hurt corporations first. They will hurt farmers by driving up costs in an already fragile market. And Deere is not backing down. No reversals. No apologies. No symbolic gestures. Just forward motion. This standoff is no longer about one factory or one tariff. It is about what American industry is supposed to be in an era where efficiency beats sentiment. And that leads directly to the final reckoning. What is happening here is not unique. John Deere is simply the visible case study. The deeper pattern is unavoidable. Companies that cling to political comfort over economic reality fall behind. Companies that adapt survive, but not without backlash. The real danger is not that manufacturing is leaving the United States. The real danger is believing it can be frozen in time. Automation will continue. Global markets will continue. Capital will continue to seek efficiency. The question is whether policy responds with preparation or punishment, because tariffs may satisfy a desire for control, but they do not train workers, they do not modernize supply chains, and they do not stop technological displacement. This moment forces an uncomfortable choice: adapt to the future or legislate against it and absorb the cost. John Deere made its decision. The rest of the country is now being forced to make its own, and the outcome will define what American industry looks like for decades to come.